Hey folks, we are entering into a place called Pamukkale. This white thing that you see here is not snow, it is actually calcium deposits laid down by eons and eons of water filled with calcium that have flowed over this area. This was apparently thought to be quite a magical place by the Romans, and as we see later in the video, there's going to be lots of Roman ruins and a big Roman necropolis, aka graveyard as well. So stay tuned. You guys see at this point how the water is flowing down over this mountain of calcium basically. This water is filled with calcium, and so as it flows it's leaving calcium behind, forming this incredible white landscape. Hey folks, here's Sarah in one of the great ponds. There's Ben, by the way, too. They're called travestines that are formed by this water as the water flows and forms these calcium pools. These used to be more natural. Over time, things have messed them up, and the Turkish government is busily trying to fix them back up to where they were. But you can see as Sarah reaches down to the bottom, she's going to grab basically a handful of calcium. Check that out. And that just comes up out of the earth, flows over this terrain, and leaves itself behind, forming this unbelievably wonderful white terrain. How cool is that? You get a good look at this vantage point from all these different the pools here. Like I said, these were naturally formed, and they kind of got ruined over the years by different people, and the Turkish government is busily kind of reforming them as time goes on. These are okay for folks to kind of walk around in and mess around in. Other ones we'll see that are more natural are big no-nos. There's guys here with whistles that are more than happy to whistle at you if you go into the no-no places. Here is just an awesome example of geology happening almost before your eyes. See how there's layers of sediment on this little teeny-weeny cliffside? This thing is only about 8 inches tall. It's been formed by years and years, perhaps even centuries, of calcium-rich water flowing over the top, leaving sediments of calcium behind, creating this little bitty cliffside. The next time you guys go by a cliffside, think about this. Those huge, giant, mountainous, wonderful cliffs that you may pass may very well have been formed in somewhat of a similar way. Decent view here of what the pools probably used to look more like. I think these are also aided by man's hands, but I think originally these looked a little bit more like what we're seeing here. Hey folks, really nice view of just how far-reaching all of this whiteness basically is. Pretty unbelievable, huh? And in fact, there's even more behind me, but it's over a hill and you really can't see it from here. But just gorgeous. There's no sign or anything telling us what this is, but it sure is cool. Look at the size of these bricks. Take a look at that archway. Each rock is leaning on every other rock. In a lot of these Roman archways, and a lot of modern archways, there's a center stone in the middle called the arch stone, or other words as well. And every rock depends on the weight of every other rock. You move one of those rocks, that whole thing falls. Hey folks, this is the Nymphium, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is what it looked like way back when. You can see it down here, big pool of water down here, big beautiful structure up here, and over here is what it looks like now. Apparently they removed many of the statuaries of Apollo and a variety of other gods at the time, and it's in the museum, which we can't go to because it's closed on Mondays. But this is still pretty cool stuff. You can see down here, this is where the pool would have been, down in this area right here, behind the giant finger. And then this, of course, would have been that area with all the beautiful columns and statuary. Very cool. This, ladies and gentlemen, was called the plutonium, not because it's nuclear or radioactive, but because it was a temple to Pluto, which was the god of death. Now the reason it is the temple to Pluto, the god of death, is because right next to it here, where the wife and kids are, this is an area where gases come out. There's basically carbon dioxide gases, and apparently things would fly next to this thing, or land next to this thing, or walk next to this thing, inhale the carbon dioxide, and drop dead. And since there were these poisonous gases, they thought this was the entrance or the gateway to hell or the underworld, and so they kind of worked this out that way, which is kind of cool. Apparently there was a lot of priests who made a lot of money by being very, very famous, by basically going down into the hole. This was a much bigger hole, and I guess there's actually another even larger hole than this one. Going down into the hole and seeing how wonderful they were by coming out alive. Turns out they just held their breath. But, you know, you got to do what you got to do to make a couple of bucks, I guess. Standing right next to the plutonium now, and I'm not too sure if you can hear it or not. I'm going to put this in here and be very quiet, but you can hear the bubbling waters down underneath. It's bubbling and hissing. This is one of the sources of all the hot water that you've seen in the earlier videos. Apparently this whole structure that we've been looking at with the plutonium is all part of the Temple of Apollo, or Temple to Apollo, which apparently had what they call oracular natures, meaning they would see the future somehow in this area, as well as, I would assume, worship Apollo and all that other good stuff. This building over here, this guy in the back, behind the giant finger of doom, this guy back here is that nymphonium that I talked to before. This here is the plutonium we were looking at earlier, and then this is the back of the plutonium right back here. And then this is, it's kind of just the foundation of where the Temple of Apollo apparently used to be. Apparently now it's pretty much destroyed and decimated. Here we have the church with pillars. Apparently 6th century AD. This actually was a very, very important, this whole area over time became a very, very important, very early Christian site. A lot of Christianity, and as we'll see later, St. Philip actually is martyred here. We're walking that way as we speak. But this is a very early church. Apparently it had very large pillars and was constructed quite elegantly, they think, in its day. Now, of course, there's nothing but ruins. But a very interesting early Christian church landmark. Great example here of the aqueduct system. You can kind of see, I can make the magic finger of doom here, kind of see how it goes all the way across here, down here, down here, through here, and now you can kind of follow it without the magic finger of doom. It's broken there, but then it goes all the way along and provided water to all the different temples and churches and all the other goodies that are scattered all around Hierapolis here. Here's that church I was talking about. You can kind of see perhaps from the inside, I'm assuming these things on both sides are the walls, which perhaps had a roof over it at one point in time, one could assume. And so this would be the inside of that church. Quite large, huh? Another great view. This is apparently the ruins of the gymnasium, which beginning of the 1st century AD, it says here, one of the earliest buildings in Hierapolis, from what I can understand here. You kind of see the beautiful arches and pillars. If you can see the letters up on the top there, but both of these things have letters across the top, which is just gorgeous. Apparently, of course, the gymnasium was used for sports and athletics, but also apparently for education. According to the signage anyway, it sounds like it was an early school. So maybe if I worked here way back when, I'd actually be teaching folks in the gymnasium. You never know. You guys ever see movies with the Romans and the gladiators and the people fighting the animals and each other and sporting events? Well, ladies and gentlemen, here's where that happened. It's amazing. A 3rd century AD. Right in the middle. Every gladiator movie you've ever seen happened down there. Now we're in Hierapolis, which is in Turkey, so this actually is not in Rome, but apparently this used to hold 20, 30,000 people watching whatever nefarious mayhem took place. Just incredibly cool. Another view of the theater and the base. Apparently I just read that this bottom area down here, right down there, where the finger of death is, apparently at one point was filled with water. They made it so they could fill it and drain water out of it so they could have aquatic festivals. No idea what that means. I'll leave that up to your imagination, but that's a really cool thing to think about. Another view of the theater. Hey folks, believe it or not, I am standing at the site where St. Philip, the apostle, that one, was apparently martyred. This is a church devoted to St. Philip, and perhaps, I don't know if his bones were actually ever buried here, but this church was devoted to St. Philip many, many, many years ago. About to go for a little walk through at least part of the church of St. Philip. Thought you guys might enjoy coming along with me. I believe that's an ancient Christian symbol, if I'm not mistaken. Those fellows who you saw walking past me there, and who you hear in the background, are actually, I believe, archaeologists, or at least workers hired by archaeologists, to continue discovering more about this site. This is also still in Hierapolis, which, as I said before, was Roman, but also the seat, one of the very, very early and most important, very, very important sites of Christianity. And here I stand. Gotta love Turkey. Amazing. Small sign right up of the Martyrion of St. Philip, as they call it. According to the sign, the remains of St. Philip actually was located here at one point in time. The Christian symbol that I pointed out earlier is called apparently a chrismon. A chrismon. Which is kind of cool. Then here's the layout of what apparently it used to look like, if you can kind of see that there. You can see it was laid out apparently in a octagon shape. 8 different areas, 8 different rooms, which is apparently a very important number. And this may very well have been designed by a architect from Constantinople himself. Pretty unbelievably cool. Well, I hope you enjoyed our little adventure in Pamukkale and in Hierapolis. Hope you guys had a good time. This is Science Jim signing off, and we'll see you next time in our next adventure, which will be